Throughout the course of history, mankind conceived different perspectives to represent reality through art. From the paintings on the wall or a sculpture standing in the middle of an urbanscape area, art served as an element key to connect human beings, ideas and emotions through language and store it as knowledge and personal experience. The oldest approach to art through language is poetry. According to Jacobson and Menminghaus' thoughts, poetry is widely regarded as a genre in which semantic and formal components of language are interrelated in a particularly meaningful way. The act of reading a poem consists to express inner emotions in a way that the reader or the person who listens to it gains an approach to different perspectives of reality. According to Ross's article titled "The Language of Poetry", poetry depends upon an intricate set of combinatorial signals of the abstract patterns which poets use to section poems with, to hologram with, and to make numerical music. Furthermore, the author states a question: when does the reader have the right understanding of the poem? Followed by the answer: I think clear, never. Just as the language of poetry is made to allow artists to break free of the bondage that would be imposed by any fixed system of categories, so the great poem is great precisely because of its boundless capacity to resist analysis.
Considering poetry as a vessel of language capable to express inner emotions in a free and meaningful way according to a poet's personal experience, our notion about art has also changed through the years. As Seligman points on her article New Minor Literature on the Death of Contemporary Art, the relationship between minor and major literature has changed radically in the contemporary social circumstances. Culture, as a whole functioning subordinately to the market, has become a minor factor in society, with or without the acknowledgement of the intellectual working class. In the present day, we consider art is highly attached to the discourse concerning to political and social issues. Regardless of this fact, there are some emergent artists whose concern about poetry and art relies on their own approach by performing art itself as a brief picture of the world. They consider art the same way as Eric Mottram notes suggest. The art results from a subjective predisposition to certain procedures and orders. This predisposition, conditioned by the presence of those processes and orders, the previous position accepted or opposed by interfering, for example, by using a random action, play it into a self-determining process. In other words, their tendency of poetry and art can be seen just like concrete poetry. An immediately participation and reception of these events or experience, conceptual, visual, sculptural, and music art. Now, in order to prove these previous statements, we decided to interview 3 students from the creative writing workshop of La Ibero, so they could tell their personal approach to poetry as self-taught artists. To do so, we showed them 2 different poems from 2 different artists, a recording of Bob Cubbins reciting The Sacred Mushroom, and Cristina Rivera Garza, El hombre que era el diablo del deseo from Textos del Yo.
Well, according to my experience, it's a gender and literature, and well, it has a lot of different qualities. If you read it by text, like in any textbook, they will tell you it has rhyme, it has rhythm, it has a series of aspects that make it poetry. But according to my experience, my personal experience, poetry it's a way of giving space to words. Like I think poetry is a way of giving the value that it deserves. Like I love running and everything in my life is always really fast, and poetry for me is a way of kind of slowing down and kind of taking my time to read things and to really appreciate the beauty and the value word by word, and like appreciating how they build something really beautiful when they come together, and that for me is a poem.
Well, I think it's a kind of art, a way of expressing yourself, a way of expressing, I don't know, feelings, like put them into words, or in this case, sound, as we saw. And I don't know, I think it's a very delicate yet strong way of, of expressing again. And I don't know, I think it's really beautiful. It's like listening to music or maybe like painting more than admiring an actual portrait or a paint. I think it's like painting because it's like the movement you make when you're making the art, kind of something like that.
It's a text that breaks some of the rules we conventionally use for language to express things that can't be expressed literally.
I write poetry, so that's one of the ways I approach it. I also love reading poetry, so that's another way. And I think observing it's one of the main ways to like incorporate poetry into your life, not only in reading but also in creating. Like poetry, it's based on observation and it's based on detail, and that's the way I approach poetry.
Well, I've always wanted to write something, but I'm like too shy or too insecure of my own ideas or maybe my skills. But and also the kind of poetry that I like, it's like, I don't know, the people that actually read poetry and know about it tells me like those guys, like writers are like mediocre and they are like maybe not worthy, not the best stuff you can read, but I really like it. So I like um, these kind of poems that have like a punch on the at the end, like maybe you don't saw the twists at the beginning, or maybe like kind of romantic stuff that's like I don't know, like falling in love or some love lost. I kind of that kind of poetry. Also like songs. I really admire songwriters that can make a powerful lyric, because I don't know, for me it's like poetry also.
So for me, I barely read poetry, but I do listen to a lot of music and dig deep into the song's meaning and everything. It's similar, like you have a text and sometimes it's cryptic and you have to think it over and over and you start getting its deeper meaning.
Definitely the first one.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's Rebecca Garza's.
I think the first one, because the second one I didn't catch like the meaning or the context the author was like trying to, I don't know, to offer to share. And the first one I thought I think it's really like powerful images, and I don't know, like very descriptive and like very from the heart. So I really like the first one.
Both, but I like the one I understood more than the one that was
Okay.
just sounds.
Yeah.
Because it was expressive for the expression, but I don't think the poem in itself was very expressive.
Well, it makes it more beautiful, like without any question. That's one way. The other way, it's kind of mixing things together. Like in the first poem, it spoke about pain and pleasure, or that's the way I interpret it. So poetry is a way of seeing things, and by reading poetry or by writing poetry, I always find different points of view, and especially I approach life differently in a deeper way, and in a more true way, I think, in a truer way.
I can relate the most to music, I think, because there's not one single day that I'm not listening to something. So I think that could be a way of I don't know of embedding the poetry into my daily life, because I'm not like a hardcore reading fan, but I think maybe that counts.
Poetry influences my life as language because sometimes some verses like tied to something to you and you repeat it as a mantra, and those verses you can understand the world better and understand your life better. Like sometimes you have a verse that is a fragment of something so simple but at the same time like so deep that helps you go through things. So I think that it gives me more to enjoy of life and understand it better.
Mm, it's I think it's difficult.
Yeah.
Like I think most people nowadays, like the things I've heard about poetry, most people don't like poetry. Maybe because they think it's slow, but I think that's the beauty of poetry, pausing, and I've mentioned it before. But I think the interpretation and the space people give poetry has a lot to do whether they like it or not.
I think being really empathic, um, really open-minded and open-hearted, uh, not judging, like from the outside point of view, but trying to be in their shoes and trying to relate to what they communicate, to what the poet, the artist is trying to say. And I don't know, I think it's like being really open to feel also some new sensations, new feelings, new images, imagine another place. I don't know. It's like all that sensitive uh, stuff going on. So I think like putting your mind in a blank page, so you can start like letting the author draw, and then you see what came out of it, and maybe you make your own conclusion at the end.
Oh, well, I consider that for people to consume poetry, um, first of all, there's not a linear way to consume it. Like everybody has to find their own way. But if I could suggest, is patience and rereading and sort of having the time for it and probably having it in your life. Maybe have a poem book in your kitchen and you sometimes just go through it and sometimes something is stuck. But yeah, patience is what I suggest.
I think it's necessary. Like we always appreciate different kinds of art, and each kind or each gender always speaks to us about a different period in history, and not only a different period, but also a different way of viewing things. And I think contemporary art is the way we have, o sea, like, like we speak through contemporary art what's going on right now and how we view things right now. So if without it, I think we would be lost in time, like in the past. So, like the way I would describe contemporary art would be being in the moment and really using art as a tool to speak to people and to express ourselves through whatever we're doing.
Well, it sounds to me like pretentious, but also I can say that I'm totally ignorant about art, like trends or movements. But yeah, it's like maybe it's too open to the interpretation. So I think sometimes they are trying to communicate everything and really not going deeper into something. So I don't know. Sometimes I can understand it. So which doesn't mean it's like bad or
Well, contemporary art, I think it it does something similar to poetry, to simple visual arts. Like it deconstructs the language, the visual language itself, and that way you can understand the things you see better. Many people don't understand it because the point of it is to take out all the elements of mm, any literal visual images or any rhetoric visual images and take the scene language for what it is. And many people just get bored of it. But if you actually have also patience with it and try to get something out of it and try to understand it, because sometimes there's a meaning and sometimes it's deeper, and many people don't like deep meanings because they are complex. But yeah, patience and just try to be more open to different things.
After learning how each student experienced poetry and contemporary art, we compared our interviewees' answers to our previous theory backup, and we realized that most of their testimonies match with Eric Mottram's notes and about subjective art and Rust's thoughts about poetry. The three of them understand poetry as a genre of literature that shows a delicate and strong expression of feelings and unspeakable phenomena of reality through words, sometimes in an unconventional way than a more traditional one. Most of them felt more familiar with the reading of Rivera Garza's poem than Cubbing's performance, but they also are aware that both poems reach a large art outlook to different perspectives and discourses to conceive a work of art. Although just one of our interviewees told us that her approach to poetry goes by writing and reading, it is also interesting how the other two relate the meaning of poetry through people's interests on painting or music. Each of them has an experience of approaching art, and yet they understand how poetry impact their notion about reality. In other words, poetry influences people's perspective of reality according to their approach of art to different ways of language expressions.